I'm Constantine. I'm a hematologist from St. Vincent's, about to move over to Peter Mac, and I have a special interest in CLL research and new treatment. So I do thank you for inviting me tonight. I've had a wonderful trip in New Zealand. We've had great food, really friendly people, really lovely weather, and I was just telling Ben, you never get traffic jams in New Zealand. And guess what happened? Got caught on one on the way out here. So now I think you are at a number of different levels. Some of you are newly diagnosed and probably want to know a bit more information, and some of you may have had this disease for some time now. So what I would like to do is maybe just go through some of the basic things for the newly diagnosed patients, so everybody is up to speed. And then I haven't left a whole lot of data to flood your brains, but I really wanted to just take questions and be able to answer any questions that you might have, especially questions that you may not want to speak to your own hematologist about. So I'll be very happy to help. So this is what we're looking at. This is chronic lymphocytic leukemia. And what we see is we see too many of these cells, the blue cells, which are lymphocytes. Now, lymphocytes is a normal part of your blood, and they normally defend you against infection. And in CLL, what's happened is that this particular type of cell has become cancerous and started to grow out of control. It's called chronic because it takes a long time to grow. When we talk about acute and chronic, we're not talking about how bad the disease is. Acute means it grows very quickly. Chronic means it grows very slowly, or slower than acute. And it's lymphocytic because it's a disease of the lymphocyte, and it's leukemia, it's a blood cancer. So that's what CLL stands for. And the cells looks mature, and they look, for all intents and purposes, like normal white cells, but they don't work properly. They don't defend you against infection. And in fact, one of the main complications of CLL is that people get a lot of infections because the cells, the good cells get suppressed, whereas the malignant cells, the cancerous cells, grow up and they look fine, but they don't work properly. Right. When we talk about stages in CLL, and a stage is a way to describe how advanced the disease is. Now, not everybody will go all the way from stage 1 to stage 4. And different people get diagnosed at different stages. So some people have a blood test for an entirely unrelated reason, like for a physical or for insurance purposes, and gets found to have CLL many, many years before symptoms come on. So a lot of people get diagnosed in stage 0, whereas other people get diagnosed when they feel ill or when their blood counts drop low, and then by the time they get diagnosed, they're stage 3 or 4. And you may have had the disease for a number of years, just not knowing it. But in general, a stage of disease describes roughly how long we expect patients to live. The more advanced disease, the longer you've had it, the less time, the shorter the lifespan tends to be. So stage 0 means that all we can find is too many cells in your blood. But none of the glands are swollen, the liver and the spleen are normal size. And then typically you stay in stage 0 for long enough, your glands start to get swollen. And your glands are in your neck, under your arm, and in your groin. And if we scan you, we'll see the glands in the back of your body, on the inside where we can't feel them. And then eventually when the glands, once the lymphocytes, the cancer has infiltrated the glands, they start to go to your spleen and your liver. So the doctor might be able to feel your liver and your spleen getting enlarged. Normally you shouldn't feel those organs. That's stage 2. And then as the cells get more and more, your bone marrow stops working properly because your bone marrow is a factory for your blood, and that's where the cancer tends to accumulate. And it's just a simple space issue. There's so many cancer cells in there that the normal cells don't have the room to grow. So the first thing that starts to drop is the red cells, and then the last thing to drop are things called platelets, which are a normal blood component that stop you from bleeding. So this is stage 1 to 4. And this is the Rye stage system, which is described by Constantine Rye. He's still alive. He's at the Long Island Jewish Hospital in New York in the 1970s. And it's still a very accurate way to describe the typical disease course. Now, the lifespan is listed there as an average. And this is the lifespan as described by Rye back when he first described the disease. We think that we've actually made a significant difference to the lifespan since then. So for example, If you get presented with right stage 3 to 4 disease today, I would say that your chances of living, 7 to 8 years is actually pretty good, as opposed to the typical 2 to 3 years, which is what we described back then. And that's because we've made really good progress in being able to control disease and treat people. So I think the important thing to realize is that not all patients will progress. And I certainly have a cohort of patients who were diagnosed 20, 25 years ago who are still fine, okay? So not all patients will progress. Some patients progress, other patients don't. Sometimes we do tests to help to predict who's going to progress and who is not, but the tests are not always accurate. Some people we predict will progress very quickly, never does so. And other people, when the tests look very benign, do progress. So in fact, the best indicator of how you do in the next 3 or 4 years is how you did in the last 2 or 3. So let's say sometimes people come to me and they get a new diagnosis of CLL, but when you look back in the blood test, it's in fact obvious that they had it 5 years ago. And the blood count back then was not very different from now. And for that person, I can say, well, look, you don't have any glands, your liver is not swollen, your other blood counts are fine, and I know that your blood counts 5 years ago is very similar to what it is today. So I can tell you that your chances of running into trouble in the next 5 years is actually very low. Sure, we'll observe it and we'll be very careful and make sure that nothing changes, but you've declared yourself to be a slow progressor, okay? So not all patients progress, and in fact, if you're diagnosed in your 70s with CLL, there's a pretty good chance that you will in fact live what we consider normal lifespan in the population, and run into trouble with a stroke or heart attack or something. And in fact, some other disease may in fact take over and cause your death before the leukemia becomes too much of an issue. Now, if you're in your 30s and the 40s, then almost certainly sometime in your lifespan you will need treatment for this leukemia because you've got so many more years to grow. So approximately 50% will never require treatment. And an important thing to realize, and it's very frustrating for patients, is, well, I have leukemia, why can't I do something about this right now? The important thing to realize is that we have done those experiments. So in the 80s, we've done experiments where we've done what we call randomization, which means that we flip a coin, and we take patients and we flip a coin, and we say, you get treated early, whereas for the second person, we say, we'll wait till your disease gets really bad before we start chemotherapy. And that's the fairest way to determine in an objective way whether something works or not, when you randomly assign people to two different ways to treat. And their experiment has been done twice. And on both those times, people who start treatment early don't live any longer than people who wait until the disease gets quite bad before they start treatment. The total duration of lifespan is actually the same. It just means that you get to have the side effects of treatments earlier. And the other thing is, treatment today is very different from treatment 2 years ago, and it's very different from treatment 5 years ago. If you need a computer in 2 years' time, you're not going to go out to the shop and buy a computer today, because what is considered best treatment today may be obsolete by 2 or 3 years' time. So it's quite reasonable, if your disease is very slowly progressive, not causing any problem, to watch carefully. And when the time, sometimes you may never need to be treated, and sometimes when you do need to be treated, when it does progress to a stage where you need treatment, at that time, then we give you the best available therapy at that time.